Whenever we talk about the juvenile people committing such heinous crimes, they are no more juvenile. Why? Because a juvenile is a person with a sweet heart, with a kind soul.
Are we as a society now starting to take revenge on children?
It's easier to bring children into crime, but for the same reason, they're also easier to be brought outside of crime.
Each child is a history.
The number of rapes committed by juveniles shows a 60% increase in 2013 compared to 2012.
6% of rapes are committed by juvenile offenders. 70% of these are committed by people between 16 to 18. Another study by an NGO that says 1 in every 8 juvenile offenders is an orphan.
0.05% of all IPC crimes amount to rapes by juveniles. 1,678 juveniles altogether in the entire country of 1.2 billion booked for murder and rape in 2012.
We sometimes tend to look at statistics the way we want to, not the way we should, because some issues evoke strong emotional responses in us. Offences committed by children and juvenile justice is one such issue. Most of us are either horrified by the fact that young children can even commit offences, or get outraged by news reports that show gory and sensational reporting. It is important to remember that these statistics are not just numbers, but lives. Lives of children with broken dreams, a lost childhood, and wounded hearts. One can use words like criminals, offenders, or juveniles to refer to them, but we often forget to think who these offenders are and what made them commit these crimes.
One of the understanding where the children are coming into the conflict of situation is that they are mostly the children who are from economically poor backgrounds, because sometimes we feel that situations in which they are living, it is forcing them to get into these crimes, and also that there are adults who are misusing this youth, and they are making them to drug peddlers, they are getting into violence, and they are getting making them to commit the crimes. These are all adults who are intentionally making use of the children, because there is a very less punishment for the children.
These are children who deserve to be treated and not to be sent to jail as punishment. All they need is a supporting hand that can give them love, care, and protection beyond law. They need to be reformed and reintegrated into the society. Kalpana Purushothaman is one such hand for many children.
I work with children. I've seen abuse. I've seen violence. I have first-hand experience of a lot of the pain and the distress that I see in the children that I work with. So I connect very strongly with that. I want to share with you the story of, I will call him Dinesh. He's a child who was abandoned by both his parents, and his grandmother raised him. When he grew up, he had a few learning disabilities, because of which he is not able to focus in school. So he dropped out of school. No one is able to help him in school. So he dropped out of school. No one bothered to find out why he dropped out of school. He just stopped going to school. He started hanging around with friends in his neighborhood. What are the friends doing? The friends are all sniffing glue. So he's also sniffing glue. Right? And slowly he's getting into those habits for which he needs money. Right? He was apprehended by the police and charged with the theft of a mobile phone. But the mobile phone doesn't mean anything to him. The mobile phone is a means for him to earn some money to be able to feed his drug habit. He stayed in the observation home for a few months.
See, the juvenile homes are the correctional homes mainly because the children who are below 18 years who got into this kind of conflict with law, and they are trying to see that the child who has come into this kind of juvenile homes not to repeat those kind of mistakes, and reform him, give him counseling, giving him all the support what he or she require, and ensure that he mainstreamed into the society rather than committing such crimes again and again.
He stayed at the observation home. He had nothing much to do. There is no structure, there is no schedule, there is no timetable of activities for him to do at the observation home. So what is he learning there? What is the correction or reform or anything that of any sort that is happening there? Pretty much nothing. And so when he goes out, what is the sense of hope or even motivation for him to change that is there? Pretty much nothing. Right? So this child got released and on bail after a few months. By then he had graduated to a higher level of drugs because he's got a far wider exposure while inside the observation home. He came in knowing only to sniff glue. He went out knowing to do 4 other things for which he needs some more money to support.
This is not just the story of Dinesh, but the story of many children who are abandoned by their families. Families are one of the strongest socializing factors in a child's life. Most of these children come from families with a long history of violence, alcoholism, and substance abuse. Some of them even come from families where parents are caught in their own battles of survival with no or little care for their children. Exposure to violence or abuse at home, as well as hostile and punitive parenting, are important risk factors for the child's subsequent involvement in violence and other types of antisocial behavior.
No parent chooses that their child should become a criminal. I wish the family could have been provided counseling to say, hey, this is what's going on with your child and this is how this child needs to be supported.
The standard response is denial. My child did not do anything wrong. He is being wrongly accused for whatever reason. I have raised him right. It's impossible for my child to do something of this nature. I think a parallel process is also necessary to assess the parents' reaction and see how the system can work with them so that they can also facilitate instead of becoming just a roadblock to the juvenile's transformation.
For most of these children, home is often an unsafe place. School is expected to be a safe haven and a positive experience. But sadly, school and the education system itself mostly fail these vulnerable children. Many children who end up in observation homes suffer from different kinds of learning and educational disabilities that are not even detected or addressed by their teachers. This may make the child drop out from the school and can further increase the risk of indulging in deviant behavior by roaming unsupervised in the streets. Adolescence is the time of expanding vulnerabilities and opportunities. Beyond family and school, the influence of peers is immense. Exposure to violence, glorification of crime, and criminals by mainstream media and films can also influence the adolescent to indulge in deviant behavior. Studies in neurobiology say that adolescents are distinct from adults. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for important functions such as planning, reasoning, judgment, and impulse control, is the slowest to mature. This is a process that gets completed approximately by the age of 25.
With children in this country, there are certain underlying factors that perhaps make them very vulnerable or susceptible to committing a crime of this nature. First and foremost is the fact that a lot of these children are curious about the subject of human health and sexuality. And because we do not have a culture where either at home or at the school, these lessons are being imparted to them in a scientific and in a rational manner, they often end up satisfying their curiosity by exposure to pornography. And after having received that kind of exposure, it is the tendency of a child perhaps in that position to act out what they have experienced in the absence of somebody actually teaching them what is right and wrong. So it is this very, it is the very innocence that defines a child that also makes them vulnerable to committing a crime of this nature.
Yeah, sometimes the juveniles they will feel guilty they will feel guilty. Here onwards I won't do, I won't repeat. Sometimes they are pleading us, please give me a chance, and here onwards I won't repeat. Like that there are most of the time some juveniles are started crying. I have seen in lot of cases. After completing the counseling, we used to ask the questions what we have to do with the accused. They used to tell, you put him behind the bar or give him for a period of months punishment.
In a lot of these instances where we are dealing with very young children, the expectation from the justice system is very clear. So and so person has done something wrong, please ensure that he or she is punished. Now the punishment in the child's mind could be as simple as just hitting the delinquent once, or it could be as significant as perhaps putting him behind bars, or punishing him in the eye of law, or making the policeman take action against him. So the expectations really vary, right? But a teenager who is perhaps at the age of 13 or 14, on the other hand, will probably have slightly more mature expectations from the justice system, where he or she might say, I want this person imprisoned, I want this person to be punished by the court. So slightly more mature expectations emerge as the age profile of the victims also increases. So I think you can't quantify the experience saying that the delinquent's experience is more than or less than the victim. They are very different experiences. While the victim will of course have the trauma of the assault, trauma of the crime itself, the offender will be dealing with recurring flashes of the hurt that they have inflicted. They will feel a lot of guilt, a lot of remorse. They will probably plead for a chance to just have a conversation with the victim and personally apologize. Even if the victim decides that I am compromising the case and I don't wish to go forward, the law will not permit that, because it is between the state and the accused. But is there a case where such a system is built? Yes, restorative justice principles are extremely sound. They have worked wonders in many places, and especially when both the victim as well as the perpetrator are in the right frame of mind to actually sit across the table, talk to each other and achieve some kind of a closure. Having a system that somewhere restores that sense of power and control over to the victim, and also gives the offender a chance to meaningfully make up for whatever he or she has done, makes a lot of sense.
See, people ask me about this mental health of children who enter the juvenile justice system. How would you feel if you were a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 year old who were suddenly apprehended by the police, taken away from your family, taken away from everything that you knew or was familiar to you, taken to a new place, very often not even told what you have done or why you are being taken away, and then told that you have been charged for having done something wrong. Right? If you can imagine even for a few seconds the terror and the confusion and the sheer sense of bewilderment that a young child can feel, that's what these children feel when they are told that you've been charged with something. They come in with a huge amount of fear. They come in with a huge amount of confusion. They come in with a huge amount of uncertainty about what is going on, not knowing what is going to happen. We have very few mental health professionals actually trained, equipped or experienced to work with children in conflict with the law, right? Because it calls for a specialized set of skills and specialized information and experience to be able to work with these children.
The observation homes are underfunded. There are not enough professionals there. Nutritious food becomes a difficulty. Education becomes a difficulty. Rehabilitation has not occurred to the extent that it should occur.
I don't know what is observed there. It is definitely not home. We call it special home. There is nothing special there, and it's definitely not home. So therefore, what is it that he knows to do? He knows that he can pickpocket at a bus stand, at a railway station, at whatever. And unfortunately for him, this time he was older than, he had already crossed 18 years. So this time he got arrested by the police and he went to Parampara Agrahara jail, which is the central jail for adults in Bangalore. And once he was gone there, once he had gone there, he got exposed to older adults who have, seen much more of life, who are much more hardened in that sense, who have much more serious criminal histories, right? And the next time I saw him after several years, Dinesh had also developed a series of mental health problems because of prolonged use of drugs, prolonged sexual abuse by the inmates at the jail. And the next time I saw him, I couldn't even recognize him. And it always fills me with a sense of deep sadness that here is another child that we lost.
Therefore, behind every juvenile, there are failure stories of broken families, schools that have failed to educate them, teachers and parents who have failed to teach them the right from wrong, and a society that only notices them after they have made a mistake.
India is hardly a conducive place for children. Our track record with children in need of care and protection is absolutely preposterous. Take for example the juvenile in the case of the Nirbhaya incident. Very little effort was made to understand his background or his, the reason why he was in that bus on that fateful day. Everybody just said 3 years is too little, don't allow him to get away scot-free. But whatever little information was available in public domain, what emerged was that he came from a very poor family. He was sent across as child labor to Delhi. He worked in a restaurant or a cafeteria in Delhi for many years as a child labor. No labor commissioner intervened to actually make the owner or the establishment responsible for it. He was consistently neglected by the system that should have taken him in. Now, once the system neglects somebody and they end up committing some wrong, shouldn't the system and the state also take some level of responsibility in that crime? So far as the punishment given to juveniles in conflict with law is concerned, the issue is not whether we should send them to an adult prison if they fall within that range. The issue is not that. The issue is, do we have a working juvenile justice system? Let's assume that 3 years in the observation home is too small. Increase it to 5 years in the observation home, or maybe 7 years in the observation home. Have greater systems to put in place parole officers and probation officers, so that the child, after he or she is reintegrated into society, can be continuously monitored to determine as to what extent they are now free from the vulnerability to commit crimes. Those are the more sound approaches to juvenile justice, not sending them to adult prison where they are going to get victimized, where they will probably be subjected to all kinds of abuse, and where they have very little means to stand up against the larger body of convicts who are seasoned criminals.
This child that I spoke about, he was raised by his grandmother, a woman in her late 60s, who used to work for a local church nearby, and the church had given her a small room to stay, and they used to give her food, and they used to give her a small sum of money because she used to sweep the church premises. This old lady, she would come walking for a distance of about almost 2 kilometers. She would come walking. So she would, open her sari and she would take out this ragi mudde, and she would say that this is what they give me in the church, for lunch. And she'll say, I didn't eat it. Extreme poverty. But she would have wrapped it in her sari, walked 2 kilometers in that hot sun and bring it, and she'll say, you please give this to my grandson. This is all, as a poor mother, this is all I can give him. The one thing that makes the difference for a child to not re-offend, and to be able to sustain that non-offending behavior, okay, is a positive relationship with one caring adult. Right?
Like Dinesh's grandmother, there are some people whose love can reform these children. Being inside a prison or a juvenile home fails to achieve reform. We can achieve this by involving families and the community in juvenile justice system. Also, remember the words of Malala.
One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen, they can change the world.
These are just not just stories with a beginning, middle and an end and a fancy title, you know. These are real lives that we are talking about. Most of the children that I've worked with, what they expect from us while they are in the system is kindness, compassion, to be treated fairly. You know? It's our responsibility as aware adults to be mindful and to make them aware of what their rights are. This is not charity. It's not just kindness and compassion alone. Okay. They need it, yes. But what are they entitled to? They deserve to be treated right. Somewhere there is also the hope that by doing this, I also want those voices which are otherwise not heard to be heard.